Welcome to That Super Show, the podcast where we talk all things super from the inside. I'm Neil Benson, CEO of Superware.
And I'm Sarah Penn, CEO of Mayflower Consulting. Each week, we unpack what's changing in the industry, what funds are wrestling with, and how tech and regulation are shaping the landscape.
Sometimes we bring in expert guests, but mostly it's just us having a real conversation about how super is working and what could make it even better.
Let's get into it.
G'day, Sarah. Welcome back to That Super Show. Well, welcome to That Super Show. This is our first episode. Amazing.
Thank you. Hi, Neil. I'm very happy to be here. Edition number 1 of hopefully of many.
Awesome. Well, I've been brushing up on the news affecting superannuation sector recently, and there's, as always, there seems to be heaps going on. We're heading into the end of the financial year. It's been a pretty busy time. Obviously, we've got the government having been re-elected. Looks like Div 296 is going to be one of the bills that's going to pass. How do you think it's going to land? Where do you see it going from here?
Well, sadly, I think it's probably going to go through pretty much in the format it is, which is going to drive everyone bananas.
Why do you say that?
Because of the unrealised capital gains tax issue. At a macro level, I think it's perfectly reasonable that people who have extortionate amounts of money in their super can pay a bit of extra tax. I think we'll all live. As always, though, the devil is in the detail and trying to figure out how on earth to even calculate it.
There's a couple of contentious components. One is the taxing of unrealised gains. I don't think there's any other part of the Australian economy where the government attempts to tax unrealised gains. Although I did hear somebody say that land tax is a fairly similar kind of tax, but because it's based on the value of the property. I didn't buy that argument. And then the other part is then the non-indexing of the $3 million limit. So, inflation will eat away at the value of that. And
yes, it
$3
will.
million will be the average price of a house someday in the future.
Not far off in Sydney.
Yeah. Is it going to be fair on our kids that unrealised gain applies to balances of over $3 million? I think there's a long way to go, many, many years in the future, for a government to make a tweak and say, well, yeah, we're going to attach the Div 296 limit to the transfer balance cap, for example. So those things stay in lockstep in the future. We never know.
I think that's highly likely. I think it's often the case that when there's new legislation coming in, people forget that it will get changed in future by someone else, often the same party, maybe the other party, but it will get updated. I think 3 million is a good place to start, and it can always get changed later.
Some people are critical of the number of changes that have been made to the superannuation system over whatever it is, 30-year lifetime. But
oh yes, I'm happy to join in that party.
Well, you couldn't have designed it perfectly at the outset. It's one of those systems that has evolved over time. We try and find ways of making it fairer to everybody, fairer to the taxpayer. And I read recently that the tax benefits given away by the government through the superannuation system are more than the savings that they would make if they just give everybody the age pension. And it was designed to deflect costs from the age pension. So I think there'll continue to be adjustments made over time to make it fairer for everybody.
Yes, I haven't seen that. You must put a link in the show notes, so I will read it too. I have to say, I do find it a bit hard to believe. Maybe it was on the calcs of how much money was in the system at the time. If you look at it from an international lens, we're normally stated to have the 3rd or 4th best system in the world, but as you say, it doesn't mean it can't do with fixing. I think it's getting that balance right between when you're on the inside and constantly trying to make all the changes that keep coming at you. It gets harder and harder and harder. But as you're right, from the outside, actually, funnily enough, there's a couple of graphs, which I'm sure we can stick in the show notes one way or another, that show that in about 2011 and 12, the people who were benefiting from tax in super were the top 20% of income earners by a huge margin. And that has in fact changed significantly. So it is much fairer now than it was before. The funny thing that we've now got actually is, I saw the other day, people who earn between, I think it's $45,000 and $70,000 are penalised by the super system over and above any other group. And that's because people in the lower category get the LISTO, which is the lower income super tax offset. But the problem is the average household income in Australia now is about $90,000 or $100,000 a year. So there's an awful lot of people who fit into that $45,000 to $70,000 bracket and are getting no value out of super. It's right borderline on just sticking it, going to CommSec and buying some ETFs, let's say something sensible instead, compared to having it in the super system. So hopefully that'll get fixed soon, but I'm still happy for the $3 million to go ahead.
The only downside, I guess, of all the changes over time is it erodes people's trust in superannuation and them believing that it's a great place to park their money for their own retirement. And I hate to see that. So, but I do understand it. The frequency of the changes leads to that kind of thought process for a lot of people. But you've got to remember that there's changes to the tax system outside of super as well. They're just maybe not as memorable. Changes to land tax and local taxes, as well as federal income taxes as well. So the systems are constantly being changed.
Yes, well, it's very interesting, actually, the whole argument about framing. When the original tax rate on drawdown is 0, you go to try and change it and all hell breaks loose, which is exactly what has happened. But if you look at, as you say, if you look at like income tax rates, they're changing all the time. They go up, down constantly. Most people potentially tell you what their marginal tax rate is, but they probably couldn't tell you what their actual netted off tax rate is. We all just live with it and have, roads and hospitals and healthcare and get on with it. But yeah, because it starts off at 0. But anyway, that's a whole nother discussion. We can have that for our big idea section some other time.
And what else has been happening in the news, Sarah? What have you seen coming out of APRA or ASIC recently?
Well, speaking of meddling but trying to make it fairer, let's talk about APRA and their recent missive about all super funds need to have multi-factor authentication and get on with it fast. There's 2 things for me. One, we're already onto passkeys, which means multiple factor authentication is so last year. And secondly, just it's very difficult as it is to ID people. And this just adds to the entertainment and the service standards that we're already complaining about.
So I did an analysis of 15 superannuation funds last year and logging into the member online experience. And they all, bar one, required me to set up multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, right.
And it was via SMS. So it's not perfect. That's a slightly vulnerable mechanism, but it's better than just having using a password. But it's interesting that none of them offered the option for an authenticator app, which I would have preferred. Although I've since heard that a couple of funds do offer that option. They just weren't in the 15 that I tested out. But yeah, you're right. Passkeys are an even better security protocol that they're just not offered today by, I don't think, any superannuation fund. I do feel for them though, because a lot of members join a superannuation fund, they're not signing up themselves through a website where they can set up that multi-factor authentication. They come through an employer route or some other mechanism. Maybe their financial advisor sets them up with an account. And it's tough to identify those people, ID them, put them through KYC, AML, and then ask them to set up multi-factor authentication. So it's a tough challenge.
Yes, and most of that, because super has the exception. So in superannuation, you don't have to AML people on the way in. You only have to AML them on the way out, which in the early days of super, when all the money was coming in and none of it was going out, sounded like a great game. But now lots of people are retiring and trying to take money out, and suddenly you've got lots and lots of baby boomers who we all know. There's a big mix of people in any generation in terms of their ability to deal with technology. But when you're really excited about getting some money out of super and then you find out that you can't get it because your boss who set you up in 1996 put in the wrong tax file number and spelt your middle name wrong, and now you can't get AML'd and you can't get your money, it all gets a bit entertaining.
Yeah, I'm sure the folks working in member services have a grand old time handling members like that with discrepancies and spelling and identification. It must be horrible. But
yeah, it's very common.
I'm in 2 minds whether we should do those checks on join or on exit. I think on exit is probably appropriate. It'd be nice if we had the option as a member to make it easier at the start, so I can have the right data, ensure that I'm spelled correctly. And if I choose not to, or if I'm unable to do it until later, then we deal with it later. But let's improve the process where we can for the members who can.
Absolutely, especially for large super funds. So Hostplus is one of the largest super funds. I understand they have about 250,000 new people join the fund each year, where it's the individual person who makes a choice about where they're going to put their super and they join Hostplus. So for all those people, it should be, she says on her high horse, the same as opening a bank account. Just AML them on the way in, right? Anything you can do to reduce the number of people that you have to deal with on the way out where things are going to be wrong. I think it's that thing too of, as we often do, we think about either it is the way in or it's when they try and get their money out. But obviously a lot of people have the same super account for 20, 30, 40 years. There's lots of opportunities across that time frame to AML them. You could do it by age or how much money they've got. There's a million different ways you could cut it to figure out who to do first. Even people who regularly use the app would be a good place to start, rather than feeling like you either keep doing what you're doing, which is it's hard, or you swap to doing everyone on the way in, which is a nightmare when the employers are signing people up. How do you even do that?
So if anybody out there in the superannuation trust land is working on AML improvement or authentication improvements, let us know. We'd love to shout out your good work and share that with other funds so that we can all lift the game. Well, I see the chairman of ASIC, Joe Longo, is again just rattling the cages with another reminder that he's keeping an eye on everybody. What the latest news is that trustee directors have no excuses for not understanding what's going on with member complaints or service failings. Ignorance is no excuse, is the message from Chair Joe Longo. The regulators really stepping up the rhetoric at the moment. Yeah, what do you make of the latest missive?
Well, as I say, ignorance is no excuse in the eyes of the law. The difficulty, however, is how to make sure as a director that you're getting the information that you need to be able to look at it. Having said that, I'm the first one to give the regulators a hard time if I think they're overstepping, which is often looking at you, DDO and RG97. But in this case, honestly, I know it's hard if you're a director, but it's your job. You're getting paid money, hopefully a reasonable amount of money, to be on top of what is going on. And if you're a trustee of a superannuation fund, that's a really, really important job. And it is beholden on people who are directors, trustee directors or non-executive directors or any kind of whatever director on ASIC's list, to make sure they're well and truly on top of what's happening and to make sure their fund is able to provide the information they need to be able to stay on top of it. I'm a little bit short on sympathy, I've got to say. Doesn't mean it's hard. It's a big job though. And if you don't want a big job, there's lots of other people who want the big job.
Yeah. Yep.
Personally, I have no wish to ever be a director on a super fund. It sounds awful.
Oh, I don't know. You get to go to the big conference at the end of the year and hang out with all your big mates. And yeah, I think it'd be great.
No, I'm happy to go to the conference and hang out with my mates drinking martinis, as you and other people well know. But yeah, I can do without that bit. In fact, that actually follows on to another thing. APRA has released a consultation paper recently, 510, about governance, and in that they are really looking for a step up in the way that directors vetted, the way they behave, the way that funds make sure they have the appropriate levels of education and basics like police checks and things. So it'll be very interesting to see what that means. And here's my hot tip for today. If this is the first time you've heard the words CPS 510 and you work in a super fund anywhere near a board, you need to go and read the consultation paper stat and get onto it, because boards only meet, as we all know, 4 times a year normally. If you want to start making substantial changes to how your board operates, you need to be getting on that horse sooner rather than later, even though it comes into force in a couple of years, because 2 years' time is 7 or 8 board meetings away. Terrifying.
Not a lot of time to turn it around. What do you think the differences are between the expectations of a board member of a superannuation trust and a publicly listed company? Should there be differences in terms of the kind of qualifications they have, the experience, the background checks, or are the two roles kind of equivalent, looking after a super fund or looking after a publicly listed company?
Publicly listed, there's a huge amount of constant communication that goes to the market about what's happening with a large listed company. And you have proper AGMs, annual general meetings, which is an opportunity to not approve remuneration. And if you really want to go there, to organise a motion to remove a board member. So there's things in place. None of that exists in super. Oh. And at the same time, super is part of our social licence, or the social licence to operate issue, because they're supposed to be acting in the best interest of their members to save for retirement. So I think if you are a board member on a super fund, you should actually be held to a higher standard than that of a board member of a listed company. And while on paper, I actually have no idea if you are or not. You might be. The reality of the situation is publicly listed board members get dragged through the mud much more easily than super fund members do. We have some stuff now that's disclosure on websites about how often board members turn up to meetings and RAM and other things. I guess for me, it's two things. One is public pressure to behave appropriately. The other is internal expectation of yourself and what that means. And board members of, well, a public listed company as well, it's a stewardship role. There's a lot of people who've come before you. There's a lot of money, hopefully, in the bank to keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, there's a lot of members' money. Even if you're a tiny fund and you only have $2 billion, that is $2 billion of someone else's money that you are looking after. And so I think that concept of stewardship and making sure that your fund still exists or is able to still exist in 20, 40 years is what you should be thinking about primarily as a board member and what you need to make sure that continues to happen. So much more there is to say, but we'll do it a different time.
The call to action there is go and check out CPS 510 on the APRA website. It's a consultation paper about the stewardship expected from our directors. Awesome.
Indeedy.
I saw another little ASIC one. This one sounded really nitpicky to me. There was an ongoing advice fee arrangement between a member and the advisor inside a super fund, and the agreement didn't specify the member's account number. The member must have had more than one account, and maybe the wrong account got debited the ongoing advice fee, and ASIC pulled up the fund and said that was not acceptable. What? That's it. It seems like a very minor issue, but what do you make of the whole ongoing advice fees, particularly for members inside our large open offer funds?
I'm perfectly happy for ongoing advice fees to be taken out of super, as long as they're reasonable. And funds are supposed to have and check limits and check that the money that's coming out and getting paid to the advisor is reasonable. Now, as to what reasonable is, of course, that is very entertaining other discussion. ASIC nitpicking about someone missing an account number on a form, I have to say it's a significant eye roll from me. There are so many bigger fish to fry. That is not high up on my list of issues. I think the quantum of advice fees is easily a much bigger issue than whether or not someone filled out the paperwork properly. It's issues like that's when I think people get annoyed with super as a system when you see things like that.
Okay, so ASICs may be doing their job, and you could say that that kind of surveillance is a necessary part of the regulator's expectations. But making that public, really, I don't understand.
Yeah, the public side of it. Like, oh, come on, guys! Like, really? They need a press release?
Ongoing advice. Then we're talking about F296 coming in as a new bill. The enactment of the reforms from the levy review into superannuation and advice seems to be dragging its heels. Nothing happened in Labour's first term, in the first 3 years. The levy review, I think, was published shortly after they took government. We've seen very little action of its implementation. Do you think it's going to happen? Do you think advice is going to change for the better anytime soon?
I think it will happen. I really do think it will happen because there was actually bipartisan support for nearly everything in the Levy report. Michelle Levy is a very wise woman. I think the government's thing about how they couldn't, Stephen Jones publicly said at an ASFA conference, and I know he said it because I was the one who asked the question, because I'm a shit stirrer, was why, like, when is this going to get? When's the second tranche? When's the rest of this, great ideas going to get implemented? And he said that they were looking to have it as a single piece of legislation, which to me sounded like a stupid idea because you're trying to get 6 things through in one bucket, which is always going to be hard. And secondly, he said that the reason they hadn't done it was there weren't enough people to write the legislation, which is right in the same bucket as we can't offer good administration to our super members because we don't have enough people to do it. Well, I'm sorry, mate. Find a different way.
Yeah.
But I think they will get it through. The things in it, getting rid of the statement of advice, although what that's replaced with will probably end up being just as painful if you're an advisor, I suspect. The nudging thing so that you can help people make better decisions without it falling into personal advice, I think is fantastic. Cannot come soon enough.
Yep,
I think everyone's in agreement on, or nearly everyone's in agreement on that. But yeah, as to when it's going to happen, I'd like to say soon. Team, hello, Beulah. Yes.
I've a few reservations about this. I can't remember what the Levy report referred to as like a part qualified financial advisor. So, they're not as educated and certified as the current standards we expect of professional financial advisors. And they're able to provide a little bit more than general advice. It's maybe limited personal financial advice on a single topic. I can't remember the name of the qualification, but it just sounds a little bit open to abuse. And are we going to see banks and all these other financial services organizations pile back into financial advice after exiting the market, a few years ago? We'll see.
Yeah, I hope not, and I hope that doesn't go anywhere. Is the short version. It'll be like there was an exception for accountants for a number of years to be able to offer limited advice around self-managed super funds. Lots of accountants went through the process of getting that license. Nobody used it. It was or hardly anyone. It was an administrative overhead, total pain in the ass, and has since quietly disappeared from view. And I think this could likely go the same way, because actually the nudging side of things will hopefully the combination of that plus not needing to do, a full statement of advice every time you clap eyes on a client, both of those should hopefully get rid of the need to have this sort of half-assed in-between version, which, as you say, is just an opportunity for arbitrage. And we're in financial services, and if we can... Financial services people are bloody good at finding an arbitrage, and often that is about making the company more money than it is about, helping people retire well. So, yeah, I'm with you. Hopefully that goes nowhere.
Yeah, well, anything we do, I think we have hundreds of thousands of people retiring every year in Australia and only 15,000 advisors serving them. It leaves huge cohorts of people without any ability to access financial advice for a reasonable price. Yeah, so anything we could do to improve that situation would be good. And you mentioned some stats about how many financial advisors we had in Australia compared to the UK. And I found that really interesting. Can you refresh?
Yes. So in the UK, last time I checked, there's about 80 million people live there compared to our 28 million. And they have about 20,000 financial planners, and we have 15,000. So that's 20,000 compared to 80 million, and we have 15,000 compared to 28 million. So as you can see, statistically, there's where someone's way off the mark, which is one of the things that makes me think I don't think we need loads and loads more full financial advisors. And it has flatlined the number of financial advisors that we have. So it's pretty stable now. So we're sort of, the new normal is coming into place. And look, there's issues with that, but none of them are insurmountable. I think the issue is that the average punter doesn't want and will never want to pay $5,000 for advice. And so we just have to have some other way of helping those people, which puts us closer to what it would be like in the UK in terms of ratios. Yeah, absolutely.
I've been mulling a lot recently about trying to help superannuation funds make the business case for technology investments. We have the same issue with some of the public sector organisations we deal with, and I feel for them both. Because
I'm very sorry, Neil.
They're very keen to make investments in technology, but they're spending other people's money. In the case of superannuation, it's members' money. In the case of government departments, it's taxpayers' money. And they have to be very cautious about how they go about making those investments and making sure there's a good return. Whereas we see private companies taking a few more risks, running a few more experiments, running a proof of concept or a prototype or something before making a full-blown investment in it. It strikes me as a great opportunity for some of our funds to take a stand and go, we want to be best known for an amazing mobile app or amazing member online experience, rather than the continuous focus on driving down fees and focusing on performance, which are very important. But the closer your fees get to zero, the worse level of service you can provide. And in many cases, it means it's maybe the member's not so badly affected, but their loved ones. When the member passes and has a death benefits claim and it's one of 5,000 in a backlog, that's when those fees really come into play, because you can't afford to run the service.
Yeah, look, I think this is such an interesting area, and it permeates right through the whole organisation, actually. So speaking back to my previous rant about boards, if you're on a board, you're unlikely in the current environment to end up in trouble for not approving a spend, right? Where you get into trouble, and we've seen it, is where the powers that be, look at the costs of implementing BT Panorama, for instance. We all know the numbers there, and they've got way too many zeros on them. So when you go to the board and say, I want X $1 million to do the thing, when the board says, well, what are we going to get for it? You say, oh, well, we're hoping to get blah-de-blah-de-blah. And if it's on the risk and compliance or member service, which doesn't make you any more money per se, then the 5-year net present value is very, very hard to calculate. Yeah. And it makes it very difficult for boards or senior executives to say yes to things. So that's, I think, is one of the key issues. And then that permeates the whole sort of way down the organisation. The second issue, which I find very interesting, is the python swallowing the pig issue, which is how much change can an organisation deal with at once? And I do find that can be quite different between different sectors in the industry. And so I'm just going to say it, industry super funds often don't have as many sort of big strategic projects on the go at once as you would find in a retail platform. And that's all super. Well, a lot of it's super. And so that ability and that, I guess, maturity of the sort of PMO function and all those things to be able to make a lot of changes at once. And having worked at Macquarie, where we were at the point where we couldn't make any more changes at once, and that was because we were getting to the point where there were going to be multiple projects working on the same piece of code at the back end because we were making so many changes at once. That's the other end of the spectrum, right? Where you're actually being stopped by the sheer the amount of code versus people trying to do something to it. But that thing of being able to, how many changes can you make at once, and being able to slowly increase that, I think is something that's really worth funds looking at. And then I think there's just that whole interesting thing about how to get a business case signed off internally, which is basically a sales job. You can call it whatever you like, but I call it sales or managing up. It's really hard yards to do that and takes a lot of working around the organisation and getting lots of people on board. What have you found helps?
Well, the business case is an interesting one because a lot of the most successful customer experience transformations I've worked in, there hasn't been a black and white business case full of numbers and payback periods and return on investment and increased revenues. Or so quite often there's a bit of cost saving element, people more efficient and that kind of thing. But it's the strongly held belief by one or more executives that this is the best thing to do as a strategic lever to expand our market share, improve our customer satisfaction. It's those kind of beliefs, a gut feel that has powered a lot of successful transformation rather than a black and white business case, which is trying to convince people who are otherwise very skeptical. I think business cases are still important and they still have a place, and you still need to know whether you're on track and whether you're returning to your shareholders or to your members in this case. But yeah, I'd love to see more board members with a conviction that these kind of investments, and you can do small scale experiments rather than bet the farm on a big, huge transformation. I love your point about improving the muscle and capability for change, investing in better project management, change management capabilities, internal change and communication, so that we can deal with more change at once, because the change in regulation isn't slowing down. The competitive landscape isn't slowing down either. Everybody's going to need to improve and get better at coping and adapting to change.
I mean, maybe that's almost the meta issue, right? And we do see it all the time, right? The amount of change that's coming down the pipe from all the regulators, plus just consumer expectations never ceases to go, never goes down. It always goes up. So you've got just this avalanche of stuff coming, and then maybe it is that broader question about how do you change an organisation so that it is more able to adapt and change more quickly. And of course, when we say organisation, we just mean people, right?
Yes. The sum of people is called organisation.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I don't know. I listened to a great podcast the other day, actually, the HBR Women at Work podcast, and they were talking about managing up, and someone's written a book about how to manage up, which I have to say I was always terrible at. Apologies to anyone I ever reported to ever. I've never been very good at it. Some people are absolute experts. I'm not one of them. But
that's why you run your own business today.
Yeah, that is 100% correct. I think now that I have, on the one hand, I say I don't have a boss, but on the other hand, we have lots of clients, and that's kind of the same thing, except there's lots of them, not one. Yeah, managing all those people and their expectations and making sure we're all on track and seeing the bigger picture as well as the smaller picture and all that sort of stuff. I think there's lots there's still lots of upside to be had on that front, I've got to say. Anyway, I'll put a link to this podcast. It's called Women at Work. You don't have to be a woman to listen to it. The girl who was talking about managing up, she had some really useful ideas and tips and things actually about how to do it. It wasn't just, big picture-y stuff. It was, I would send an email and I would say this, this and this.
Okay, I love those kind of practical tips as well that you can put into action and try them out.
Yes.
What kind of events have you got coming up, Sarah? Moving on to some of the other things. We've got a few things in the calendar. I think next week you're going to be judging at an event. I don't know if people are going to get a chance to listen to this and then register and attend, but tell me what the event that you're judging and what that experience is like.
Yes. It's the Fund Manager of the Year. It's number 37. I'm just looking at my notes. Yes, I've been a judge for a couple of years now. Anyway, the awards night is next week. But I just wanted to say that it's so interesting getting to see the different applications that people make. And if you have ever thought about putting your hand up for one of these awards, I would so encourage you to do it, because it's always very random actually as to how many people apply for what category.
Really?
Sometimes there's only two or three people, right? And so,
wow.
If you put in a good application, you might actually win the damn thing. And if you know someone who's done something really great, then I think it's really worth putting someone forward for it. And it's great for your own sort of personal development, and when it comes to annual review time as well, to be able to say that I got this award, or just to actually go through the process and think about, what was the case before, what did I achieve, what did I do to get there. I think it's worth doing. Just that thing of sometimes stopping from looking at the massive to-do list, which we all have in front of us, and putting your head up and thinking about it. But yeah, it's so fantastic to read the really interesting things that people have done. I'm not the only judge, of course. Get to have a say in who wins. So yeah, next time you see one of these come along, put your hand up.
What else have you got coming up in the calendar other than your Nnominate award?
More sensible things. The event that I just wanted to touch on was the IBR Conference's annual Future Risks Conference, which is the 9th and 10th of July. So whatever that is, 3 weeks away. I'm going to be hosting a panel about governance. But these IBR conferences are really great, actually, and they're smaller, so you might only have 150, 200 people in the room, but it means the conversations are much more interesting and people are open and they talk about what's going on. And I've got some really great people coming along for that particular panel. But just that opportunity to get out there and talk to other people who do the same job as you. Prior to starting my own company, the only people I ever spoke to was the other people in my own business. And when you do that, it's just insular, right? You just hear the same stories from the same people about the same things all the time. And then you read things in newsletters and, when what's happened, but there's no substitute for actually getting out and talking to real live bodies.
I really enjoy the IBR events. I think I do find them quite intimate. Some of the ones I've been to, have been 60, 70 people there, and getting to meet other consultants, getting to meet people in the industry. The serendipitous conversations you have over lunch with a stranger you just met a few minutes ago, or have a drink at the bar in the evening. Just really valuable to share those kind of stories and get to learn and meet other people. So yeah, if people have an opportunity to register for a risks forum or any of the other events coming up in the calendar, then grasp it, go for it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I was at the Super Admin Conference a month or two ago, and one of the things I love about going to these conferences is just getting new ideas. And I wrote down a whole page of new ideas, which I have, of course, since used to torture my team with, because that's your job when you're an entrepreneur. But there were just some really great ideas out of it that have changed how I'm thinking about things as well. In fact, one of the things that I wrote down from the last conference was this idea of thinking about what question it is that you're asking. And it comes back a bit to what we were just talking before about getting business cases up to do new and exciting things and taking bets, and how do you move an organisation forward and get more change. And just that thing of thinking about, rather, what's the question that you're asking? If someone is putting forward a business case to boil the ocean, rather than the question being, do we approve or not approve this enormous business case, what other questions could you be asking about, is there a way we can take some small bets and test and learn? Are there other ways to get this project done? Or if we go back 3 steps, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? Is this project even the right way to get this thing done? Are we looking at how we're spending money? Are we taking that stewardship approach? Lots of different ways you can come at things. But yeah, asking great questions. That was one of my big things. It was a really good, I would say reminder, but I'm a bit rubbish at asking questions. So I'd say idea for me.
I come away with lots of issues and ideas to torture my team with as well. From that last super admin conference, I came away with lots of ideas for infusing our products with AI. And yeah, the development team were busy enacting some of those. So yeah, I wouldn't have had those ideas if I hadn't met some of the folks at those conferences. So good chance to get out there and expand your mind.
Yes. I couldn't agree. We won't improve as an industry if we all just sit at our own desks doing our own thing with no input from anyone else.
Sarah, it's been a great show. Lovely to catch up with you. What else can people expect on that super show coming up over the next 2 weeks and months? What have we got planned?
Oh, well, we're going to definitely talk about other events and things that are coming up. I have no doubt that our erstwhile mates at the government and the regulators will continue to lob hand grenades over the parapet at every available opportunity. I am also doing some work at the moment just looking at the statistics around retirement and super funds and where all the money is and what's changing, because I did some work in 2022 on that. So I will have that to talk about. How about you, Neil? What's coming up in your world?
I'd love to invite some more guests on the show.
Oh, yes.
Begin to get some big ideas from people in the industry. So if there's a topic that you're a specialist on, you'd love to come join us, then reach out to Sarah or myself. We'd love to have you join us on the show. Can I ask you to hold me accountable for something I've recently embarked upon, Sarah?
Indeed. I have the pen at the ready.
Okay. I have signed up with ASFA for my RG 146 superannuation accreditation. So I am going to give you a progress update until I have achieved my 146. I'll let you know how that goes. I'm doing the online course, so I'm hoping to do a few hours a week and just round out my knowledge of the sector and all the regulations and laws and ways of working that apply. And please check in on me and make sure I'm making some progress.
Oh, I will. That is excellent. I look forward to it.
Awesome. Until then, thanks so much. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to That Super Show. We hope today's episode gave you something useful to take back to your team.
If you're thinking we should talk, we'd love to chat. You can book a meeting with either of us via the link in the show notes.
And don't forget to follow the show, share it with a colleague, and drop us a line if there's a topic you want us to tackle.
Catch you next time on That Super Show.